Hi, this is Alice Brooks, the cinematographer for Wicked, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we have Alice Brooks, the director of photography for Wicked, back on the show. Alice, you're like a returning champion to the Go Creative Show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for calling me. This is exciting.
Thank you for coming on. Of course, we got Connor, our producer, as well. And I have Connor on specifically because he's always behind the scenes for all these interviews. But for this one, he's like, I need to be on because of his overwhelming fandom for Wicked. It's out of control. I think he's seen the movie more than you have, Alice. How many times have you seen it, Connor?
I'm up to 7 times.
You and my daughter, I have not seen it 7 times, but I have a 9-year-old and she's seen it 7 times as well. Wow.
Oh,
How have you seen it 7 times? It's only been out like 7 days.
Well, that's a great question. Luckily, we through our connections that we have, we were able to get access to an early screening. So I was able to attend that. Then I got to see it with my husband a couple of times, with some friends and family a couple times. So I just keep getting invited and pulled into viewings. So up to 7 so far.
That is incredible. Amazing. Oh, I'm so excited to talk to someone who's probably knows it as well as I do.
Maybe better. We'll see. Well, I want to start with a conversation about just the general look of the film. You've said many times it has this, you were going for this classic Hollywood Americana look. Obviously, it's an adaptation from a play. And of course, the legendary Wizard of Oz at the very beginning of it all. How do you describe the look of the film?
So we did, when John Chu first approached all the creatives, it was very much, we want to make an old Hollywood movie like Cleopatra or Ben-Hur, or just like these massively epic, huge sets. But ultimately, it's this love story between these two women, these two best friends. And so it's a romance in many ways, a friendship romance, but it is a love story. And so we wanted it to be romantic and world building and to immerse yourself in a new world that you have never seen before. Our own version of Oz. Wicked is our very own version of Oz.
And when you think about, okay, now I get to interpret Oz, something that has just been so legendary and iconic, are you intimidated by this? Are you excited for this? Is it all things? Like, there's got to be some kind of pit in your stomach feeling when you realize you're creating the next and new Oz.
Well, John Chu called me when we were in post on In the Heights, and he said, Alice, our next project's going to be Wicked. And so I go from like what I think is like my ultimate dream job, which In the Heights is still one of my favorite movies I've ever worked on. And then I had already shot Tick, Tick, Boom. Tick, Tick, Boom was also in post. And so now suddenly I get to do a 3rd or 4th musical, depending on if you count Wicked as 1 or 2 movies. And so it was everything I ever dreamed of. I grew up in New York City to a playwright father and a mother who was a singer and a dancer, and our house was filled with music and going to shows. And we didn't have much money, but my parents somehow figured out how to get us to live theater all the time. And it was just part of my life. And John Chu and I met 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago, 22 and a half years ago. We made his short film called When the Kids Are Away at USC, which was a musical also. And we bonded over our love of musicals. And we wanted to grow up and make musicals. And it was at a time when Hollywood had stopped making musicals. It was pre-Moulin Rouge, pre-Chicago. Like, the Hollywood musical was dead. And the fact that here we are with Wicked and just this incredible success we have with the film and just the love people have for this movie is incredible.
What do you think it says about the current movie theater going audience, and maybe even the state of cinema as it is, that there's such a love and such an acceptance for practical sets, real effects that are not special effects. There's just such a realism to this film, despite how giant it is. it's so real and it's so like practical that what does it say about us as, as a human race going to the movies? What does it say about us wanting this and loving this so much?
Well, when we started this project almost 4 years ago, it'll be 4 years ago in March that John called me. And it was pandemic, right? We're still living in the world of the pandemic. Movie theaters aren't opened. Everything has been shut, and that's when like we started talking about this movie. And so when you start talking about this movie from a place where you couldn't leave your house and everything you see is on a TV screen with only your family, only whoever's in your bubble, but then starting to dream about what is it going to be like when people go to the movie theater again? What is it going to be like when the lights go down and you're sitting next to strangers and you can hear them eating their popcorn and you can hear them laughing and you can hear them crying and you can hear their gasps? And what would that be like? And what is going to bring people back to the theater? And I think it is an experience like you would have 50 years ago when you'd go to movie palaces and see films, and movies were events. And you can see it this whole weekend, this whole Thanksgiving weekend. It was an event weekend. People went to the cinema. They went to see all three movies, Gladiator, Moana 2, and Wicked. And they want it. People want to go have this sort of entertainment, and I just feel so lucky to be part of this experience and be part of getting people into the cinema again.
It's so interesting to me that like the thing that brought people back to the movies is the thing that brought people to the movies at the very beginning. Like just good storytelling, practical sets, real classic cinematography. Like it's amazing to see that our habits really haven't changed despite how far we've gone in the special effects realm. Not to say that there's no room for it. There obviously is. It's awesome. But it's just so cool to see something like Wicked that is made so practically at the top. It just warms my heart.
It warms my heart too, and I hope that other movies that want to do things on this level with these kind of sets and this kind of storytelling and the craftsmanship that went into this movie. There's this line in The Heights that says, oh, I always mess it up. Abuela says it, but it's the little details that tell the world we are not invisible. And that's how I feel about our movie. We had so many thousands and thousands of incredible craftspeople doing such detailed work. Every single detail was so thought out on Wicked. Nothing is arbitrary. And you can see it in Elphaba's micro braids and on her every single freckle that was placed on her skin. And you can see it in every pleat of Paul Tazewell's costumes. And you can see it in every monkey feather that visual effects created, or the eyes of Dr. Dillamond. And in the cinematography realm, every lens we chose was specific. And the lighting choices we made were to draw you in. And we have about 6,000 lighting cues in Wicked, in the movie. And they're all very subtle, right? And you probably don't notice them, and maybe some of them you do, but you can feel it. And that's the thing. All these little teeny details all weave together from every single department and however many thousand people who have worked on Wicked. That is the symbol that movies should be told by artisans and craftspeople and people who are so invested in a project. And we're here and we're making this movie. Anyway, that was sort of a tangent, but it's the details that make Wicked, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
We're all about tangents here at Co-Creative Show. That's for sure.
Yeah, actually. So kind of on the note that you were talking about, Alice, I know that from my perspective, at least, watching this 7 times, it seems like you're heavily using natural lighting when it comes to a lot of these sets, like specifically the library scene, and allowing that to kind of be your key and stuff like that. I'm curious, what was your thought process when it came to the lighting of Wicked? How did you approach it?
So nature became this big theme talked among almost all the department heads. Nature was this. Actually, let me backtrack. So John talks first of all when we break down a script. Everything is about emotion and humanity and themes, and one of the themes we all kept discussing was nature. And so we would go location scouting and we'd stand in these huge barley fields or flower fields and suddenly realize like nature needed to be part of the production design. And then Paul Taswell's costumes are so infused in nature, and he's talked many times about that. And so I started to think about nature, and then John and I started talking a lot about the theme of light and darkness, that in Wicked the light is not the light and the darkness is not the darkness, that good is not good and evil is not evil. Our perception is all different. And so as I started to think about that, but also wanted to be able to do lighting cues within this while still feeling real and tangible and grounded in this nature, suddenly I realized the sun could become our spotlight. And if the sun became our spotlight, I could have as many lighting cues as I wanted. So we have these huge sections of the movie that are either sunrise or sunset shots, because the sun rises for Glinda and it sets for Elphaba. And Elphaba finds her power in the darkness, in the shadows. And so the last hour of the movie is one long continuous sunset from Wizamania to the end of the movie when she flies off at the end of Defying Gravity. And Glinda's big number, Popular, is a long sunrise. I think it's about 22 minutes, and that ends in this pink sunrise that the sun becomes her spotlight, and so nature was infused in it, and the sun really became our theme of light.
It seems like an overwhelming challenge to have to light sets as large as the sets are in this movie. Like we're talking about football fields of set. And I'd love to hear from you, first of all, what it's like having to work with these gigantic, enormous sets. I'm sure it's super fun, but also kind of like nerve-wracking a little bit, because how do you light sets this big with access to 360, which I know you had for a lot of scenes?
Yeah, John loves shooting 360. He wants, I mean, it's one of the reasons the volume stages don't work for him, is because he likes to go into a set. He wants it fully dressed and it becomes his playground with his actors. And he wants to be able to look 360 degrees and not, I mean, and that's just on a whole the way he likes to work. But then 360-degree shots became part of our visual theme between Elphaba and Glinda, and it plays all throughout movie 2 as well. And so when we're doing these 360-degree shots, I then have to think about lighting in a whole different way, because we want we can't have camera shadow. I mean, just practical things like that. And you obviously want your leads to look amazing. You want Elphaba to be the most beautiful green witch you've ever seen. So all of that, and then we shot on 17 sound stages. Most of our sets were built from fire lane to fire lane and from floor to ceiling, and we had 4 exterior sets. And 2 of them were the size of 4 American football fields each. And Munchkinland wasn't that much smaller, but Shiz and Emerald City were our biggest, and then Munchkinland, and then the train station was our smallest of our exterior sets. But we planted that barley field as well. I know everyone likes to talk about the 9 million tulips that were planted, but we also planted a barley field, so for Wizard and I and for the train station. Oh, I forgot the Wizard and I set was also outside. That actually was our smallest set.
Do you prefer a set with total control that's inside, you don't have to worry about it, or do you like the more variability of an outside set?
Oh gosh, that is a really hard question. I love real sunlight. You can't beat real sunlight. The problem is that shooting in the UK, real sunlight is very haphazard. So you then can't depend on anything. So it is. I don't have a good answer for that. You can't be real sunlight, but but the fact, yeah.
Well, what I'm curious about is knowing that you have sets that are this gigantic, knowing that you're going to be shooting 360 and you need to light it all, like in your kind of the way that you're thinking, what is the philosophy of how you approach lighting scenes like this, where you don't just want it to look like a big warehouse where it's just
No.
lights everywhere, but you have so many limitations because you're looking everywhere, no shadows. You can't put stands anywhere. Your sets go up to the ceilings. Like, how do you actually approach these types of scenes from a lighting perspective?
So everything goes into our dimmer board. And so, for instance, the Ozdas Ballroom is a set that's made out of clear resin walls. And so we could backlight those resin walls any color we wanted. And it's a club, so we wanted it to have a pulse and a life to it as well. But it's also the moment, it's the heart of the movie. It's when Elphaba and Glinda walk into or fall in love with each other. And it's also the moment where our theme of what does it feel like to be looked at is at its highest, where everyone is laughing at her. And so we have to light the space, we have to light the walls because there's otherwise they just look like plastic, a clear plastic box more or less. And so first we start to light the space, and then we figure out, okay, where I spend the weekends pre-lighting. So I go in with the electric team and I stand there and I start to feel, what does Elphaba feel like in the space? But not just Elphaba, what does Cynthia Erivo feel like playing Elphaba as she walks down the stairs? So I slowly walk down the stairs. And at one point I just sat on the stairs for a very long time. And I imagined all the people laughing at me. And it was like, okay, how does that feel? And what would the light feel like on my face? And then as we start to do that, I start to get a sense of what the feeling of the light should be. And then John wanted to do this 360-degree shot because he wanted Elphaba. We knew we were shooting 360-degree shots for this because that's part of our theme, but he wanted to shoot Elphaba's close-up first, which is a 65mm 360-degree shot where we're spinning around her for 10 minutes. And sometimes we pause because there's these moments that are just very silent in that the music completely cuts out too. And some people think we locked off the shot for those moments, but it's actually, we just have the most amazing Steadicam operator on the planet. And Karsten Jakobsen. And then so we've got one of the electricians and sometimes two who are on the floor as the Steadicam's going around with a light. We have lights rigged in the sky. We've got moving lights, and we've got this water effect playing too. So we've got water lighting through a water tray and making this ripple effect through. And the water tray has these vibrators in it that's shaking, creating the ripples on the ground. And then, so there's we're talking about 600 lights in this space. And then we have two wireless 12-channel wireless dimmer boards called mini desks. And the gaffer is carefully choreographing lights going up and down, but he only has so many hands. So sometimes I'm doing some of the sliders, and even the AD jumped in doing some of the sliders. And then our dimmer board op has the iPad running lighting cues as well. So I mean, we had 17 sets and 17 stages, and some of those stages were multiple sets. So I'm just talking about the Ozdas as one example, but there was no like, okay, we're going to put 10 lights here or the sky, and then we've got a big soft source here and a hard light here. Each set was different, and we had to light each one in very, very different ways. And the movie goes from the brightest of bright worlds outside in Munchkin Land, and it gets to the darkest of dark spaces in the lower attic when Elphaba finds out, or is first called the Wicked Witch. And so you've got a million movies in this one movie, and so each set we lit feels differently and has its own unique thing. The dorm room's our smallest set, and it was the most challenging to shoot in. We have 2 musical numbers in there.
Why was it the most challenging?
Because it's so compact. I mean, like massively, massively compact. And it was the first set we shot on. So that just alone presents challenges, right? We're all learning to work together. But I mean, Popular's one of my favorite numbers in the movie, so it worked out.
I'm getting like a panic attack listening to you explain all the responsibilities that you have. Like the trust that you have to have in your crew. And obviously you're working with professionals, but like people are people. You have to trust so much that everyone is just locked in and is going to do everything flawlessly. It's almost like the choreography on camera is just as important as the choreography behind the camera to pull this stuff off.
I mean, I had the most amazing crew, and I literally could not have done this movie without them. You do. You have to be able to close your eyes and know you can leap off a cliff and they will all catch you. They are there. They are your second set of eyes. They are the people who are invested in making this movie with you. I started something called Movie Club while we were in prep, and I had never worked in the UK before. I didn't know the gaffer, the key grip, the camera operator. Like we're all getting to know each other during prep. So on Wednesday afternoons, I started Movie Club where we'd watch movies that had absolutely nothing to do with Wicked. It just was,
I want to be invited to movie club.
it was, let's throw on a movie. It took a couple of weeks, but I got production to buy me an Apple TV, and we'd play a movie, and we'd sit in the office, and afterwards we just talk about it like book club. And it was about, what did you like? What do you like the shadows? Do you like the lighting? Or how was this storytelling? Or I thought this shot was beautiful. And we each just would talk about the movie on a purely artistic level, not and forgetting about the prep on the specific movie we're making, just getting to know each other as storytellers and artists, so that we had 155 shooting days that we're about to go into. And we have to trust each other. We have to be able to disagree with each other too, and say, I really think this is the wrong choice, or okay, we need to go fight for something together. And so how do we do that? And these are the people you're building your community with, and making your movie with. And I feel like Movie Club was like a very special time. The gaffer told me later on, he's like, when you told me we were having Movie Club, I thought you were completely crazy. He said, I thought we had so much work to do. There was no time for Movie Club, but it was the most valuable time on this movie for sure.
That sounds like so much fun. Now I want to know, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to,
What
but since you
movies we
brought it up, no, and now I want to know, what did you and your team fight for? Was there something that like wouldn't have happened had you not really fought for it?
Oh yeah. So I mean, lots of things, right? You're making a movie. Every department has ideas. No matter what, you have a budget and a certain amount of time you have to make the movie. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I worked on $500,000 movies for most of my career. And those, and in doing those, you're also, right, like you're fighting for things, and different things have different priorities, and ultimately it's about telling the best story you can. So I mean, there were, every day it was something, but one in the idea that I had that the sun was going to set for Alphaba, originally Wizamania took place during the day, and when she jumps, and once they get up to the top of the tower, it's night. And so I asked John, could I come up with suggest different time of days? And the very last one I realized was that Wizamania couldn't be day, that there's just no way to make it sparkle. That stage show, originally also that stage show was going to be done on a sound stage, the one with the Wizamania stage. That was going to be done on a sound stage, and then things changed, and we ended up building that theater on the Emerald City set. And so suddenly we're doing a stage show in the middle of the day, and there just would have been no excitement to the show. We wanted fun effects. So that was what prompted me to come up with this idea that we should shoot it as sundown instead. But the problem with that is that we're outside. So the only way to be able to control the light is to shoot all night. And shooting all night costs more money. In the UK, you've got, I can't remember what it's called, but you pay the crew for the next day. It's called a rested day, I think,
Yeah.
after a night shoot. I don't think that happens in the U.S. So then and dancer rates were different, and it's a huge dance number. So just like escalating costs was one thing, and so. But the first person I called was David Smith, our gaffer. Actually, it was a Saturday when I had the idea, and we were at pre-light, and mentioned it to him, and I said, "Can we start drawing the lighting and figuring out how much it will cost?" And so we finished pre-light. Me and the woman who was doing research and development for us, Marin, the three of us sat in David's office, and we started to draw up the plan for what the lighting would entail, and just so that like we had a plan before going anywhere else. So then my next call was John, and I told him I had this idea, and he loved it. And he's like, "Well, we've got to get Mark Platt to want to do this." And so he called Mark, and Mark immediately saw it in his head. He is the best producer in the world. He is a storyteller. He's a filmmaker. He stood in my tent almost all year long while we were making this movie with enthusiasm and excitement, and like in the trenches with all of us. And I love him to death. He is amazing. And Mark was like, "Yes, there's no other way to do this." And then of course then he has to go figure out how to make it happen. But that was just one of them. But when I said to David Smith, I was just like, is this possible? He's like, "Yeah, let's figure it out." And then we started drawing the lighting setup, and then went from there, and he started budgeting it to see what the extra costs would be for that as well. So
Yeah, and you can't even imagine it any other way. It's just so weird to think that something like that had to be pushed for, but I imagine there's stuff like that all the time.
all the time. I mean, right? Like everyone comes up with creative ideas, and then you go, "Okay, how do we make them happen?"
Yes, exactly. All I've heard is how amazing this film is. I think it's amazing. Connor saw it a million times. The feeling that I get when I watch the film is how rooted in reality it is, even though it's like this unreal world. But the fact that it's inspired by nature, you're using the sun as a primary light source, it does feel like it's rooted in reality far more so than the original Wizard of Oz. And that's just something that I think was a really great choice, and I think makes it much more relatable as you watch it.
Yeah, I mean, we want the huge. One of the things John and I talked about was like wanting this huge, vast world of Oz, but also this very intimate relationship between these two women, and it became very much about what their close-ups were like. I mean, you've got the two women in so many frames that occupy so many frames together, and it was very, very much about how do we create that intimacy? How do we create that feeling of first meeting your enemy and then your enemy becoming your best friend? And I think when you hear the people crying during the Ozdas Ballroom and at the end of the movie, that the only way to feel that is to feel that relationship between those women.
Actually, on that note, I loved the choice of how you have occasionally close-ups where they're breaking the fourth wall, where
Fourth
they're
wall.
looking directly at camera. I'd love to know because I noticed it a couple of times throughout. What was kind of the thought to choosing that?
So that is, I mean, we actually played a little bit with that also in The Heights. It is, not that that has anything to do one way, they're two very, very different movies, but the idea that when Elphaba and Glinda are connecting with each other, and actually when they first meet, the first time you see it is on the dock at Shiz. They look eye to eye at each other, and then I don't think you see them breaking the fourth wall again until Popular, and they lay in the bed and they look right into each other's eyes, and this is also another theme that continues into the second movie. But there are these moments where they break the fourth wall, where you feel them penetrating that screen and looking right at you, and it is incredibly personal, and just a moment in Popular, it's a moment of pure love.
And staying on, camera and lens choices and stuff like that, I noticed that with Glenda, Ariana does an amazing job at bringing comedic timing and whatnot to the character. And I noticed that you kind of extended the character and her comedy through some of the camera movement you did. Like when she raised the wands, the camera,
Yes.
would raise with it. I just, curious thoughts on that. Anything that, you can think of that you want to add to that?
I mean, we play. So choreography on this started. I think Chris Scott got to London before we did, because he's our choreographer. He hadn't done a movie in the UK either, and he needed to start auditioning dancers, because in the US he like has groups of people all over the country. He loves working with dancers, so he had to start finding those people, and then I brought on our Steadicam operator, Karsten Jakobsen. That was another thing I went to bat for, which was bringing him on so early so that he could start to learn the choreography. And so, I mean, Ariana in those dance rehearsals for Popular, just trying to figure out all that timing of everything, and she's hilarious. But right, it takes time to find those things with physical comedy as well. But we had first we started in a dance rehearsal space, and then the set, it was our first set, so we didn't have the actual set to rehearse on. They were still building it, but they built a makeshift set out of plywood so that we had space to work in, and start to figure out those kind of timing, because Popular is all about those moments. And even like with Cynthia and trying on the glasses, where they're looking right in the lens also at each other. I forgot about that moment. But though that originally weren't, that was something completely different, and it was through trial and error that section got figured out. And so it was very much workshopping Popular for a really long time, and Ari bringing just these great ideas, and Chris Scott also having these other ideas, and then we could go, oh, can we, like, if we do this with the camera, it's even funnier. Like even the top shot as she's spinning around once, I mean, just that, finding that too, right? Like it's just this static shot above, but it gets the biggest laugh in that number.
Yeah, I love Popular was so well done. I'm so happy with how, I mean, the whole movie, obviously, but Popular was great.
I think you
Thank
do
you.
such a good job of creating isolation for Elphaba too. Like in these big giant sets, whether it's a close up or a big wide shot, you know when she feels isolated, you know when she feels afraid and scared, and what's the right word? Like she's vulnerable. I think you do a really good job of doing that, and I'd love to talk to you just a little bit about your camera approach to creating that feeling of isolation.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about restraint as well, right? Like we're a musical, and we're a huge musical. We can move the camera, as much as we want. But it's about the silence in this movie. It is about the moments where the characters aren't singing, where the music completely stops. I mean, I think John Chu is so brave to make a musical where he stops and starts songs repeatedly, and lets everything breathe, and lets the character have moments of silence, and also that the fact that he's willing to be so close to both of them with the camera. So we do these really tight shots that, and sometimes it's completely silent or you don't hear anything. And hands are also a massive close-up of hands are play throughout the movie. And those also, hands and feet, there's something about both those things that give a character so much more information about a character. How do they walk? How do two women grab each other's hand, or how does Elphaba clasp Dr. Dillamond's hand in her hands? So I don't know if I answered your question, but it is those moments of stillness and not moving the camera that I think are actually the most powerful parts of the movie.
I agree 100%. I think that was the first thing I said to Connor is after I saw it, I'm like, I love it. It's a huge spectacle, but my favorite scenes were the small scenes, like just the little dramatic scenes, because they had so much power because everything around it was so gigantic that when you do strip it down to just the bare bones, it's like, wow, you really can feel for these characters. Now, on the total opposite side, I do want to at least talk about one of the big giant dance numbers because they're all so incredible. But I don't even know if this is the one that you want to talk about, and if you don't, feel free to maneuver around. But to me, when I watched Dancing Through Life, and just the way that that clock operated, in the way that there's whimsy in the cinematography, in the fact that it feels carefree, even though it's like the most rigid environment where everybody has to be perfect. There was just so much to that scene that absolutely blew me away. I don't even know what my question is for it, but I'd love to just get your general thoughts on that scene in particular.
That was our first major dance sequence that we did. And that was and that was one of the ones where we're constantly going back into the rehearsal space, and we're all shooting different shots with our iPhones. That the way John, Chris, and I work is we each film different angles, or we go into rehearsals at different times and explore the ideas, explore different camera ideas. And but and then Karsten, our Steadicam operator, was doing the same thing, and then we airdrop everything to John, and then John starts to cut everything to the music, either the Broadway track, or at some point we then had pre-records as well. So so then but it's very, very different shooting this number with this wheel idea on an iPhone versus a huge Alexa 65 camera with a huge lens and on a 23-foot crane with a M7 head. I mean, the reality is very different. And the thing was, with our iPhones, we kept like spinning them around, and we have this one shot where we're spinning, 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 and the wheel's spinning, and you don't know which way's up and you don't know which way's down, and suddenly a parkour dancer comes and jumps and leaps over the camera, and the camera head, while it's spinning, has to find, not even find, keep that dancer in frame while he's doing this flip, and then find Jonathan Bailey on top of a library cart, and then to and then it's just all these elements have to come together. And it was a day John Chu was having a baby, and so he wasn't on set. So Chris Scott and I, we're there. We've got the list of shots we need to absolutely 100% get on the day the director is not there, and this is one of them. And then Chris comes up and whispers in my ear. He's like, "Okay, we've got 4 chances to do this shot." I'm like, "What do you mean 4 chances?" He's like, "I talked to the dancer. He can do it 4 times safely without hurting himself." I'm like, "Okay, great." So I go talk to the Karsten. I'm like, "Okay, you've got four chances. Take one, we missed it. Two, worse than take one. Three was okay. And then take four, we nailed."
I thought for sure that shot was stitched, that flip
Yeah.
shot. When I saw that it wasn't, I'm like, there is no way. But I guess there is a way. And it takes 4 times now that we know. So in our last couple of minutes, I just we want to talk about the Emerald City, and that for sure. And Connor's got a question for you on that. But just briefly, just if you could take a couple of minutes to talk to us about the way that you prevised this in Unreal Engine, because I heard there was a clip of you online talking about your experience with Unreal Engine, sort of creating the lighting scheme for this. Can you talk a little bit to the way you prevised the film?
Yeah, so we used Unreal Engine in 2 different ways. One is like we couldn't build these sets on any backlot that existed, any studio backlot that existed. They were just too big. So we ended up renting Turf Farm in Ivanhoe, north of London, to build these sets. And so there were no pads or anything. So we could very carefully place these sets on the backlot according to where the sun was going to be. So we used Unreal for that. I used Unreal to pre-light sets, and test out different lights on sets before they were built as well. And then the last thing was that Emerald City was our last set, and we knew we were coming up to the SAG strike. Like, it started to look like the SAG strike was going to happen. It was our last set, and 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 because it's the last set, construction's behind, it wasn't ready, so you've got all these construction cranes building on the days that Chris was supposed to rehearse on the set, and that John and I were going to walk through the set and figure out exactly where all our cameras were going to go. And and early on, we had when we were in dance rehearsal space, we had thought we one short day would be like this big steady cam shot that ended up being on a crane, and you'd pull up and you'd see the big epicness of Emerald City. And since we couldn't get into the set, I mean, we sat on a steps. I've got a picture of the three of us sitting on on the Emerald City stairs below the train, on a Saturday, trying to imagine what it was going to be like. But there's huge cranes in the way; we can't see anything. And then, so we go into Unreal Engine and we start to move the camera through the space and fly the camera with the game control through the space. And we realize being high is not the answer, that you actually want to be low and you want to see the vastness of what's up, right? And we're actually moving. The rest of the movie is all about going up. And so that's where we're headed. So that changed everything, but it also changed the set dressing, because there were these big sort of stalls, and when we were low, you couldn't, then these stalls were blocking all our dancers. So then suddenly the set dressing had to start moving. And so that previous process was great. And so in the end, I'm actually really glad that we didn't have this actual physical set to work on, that Unreal actually was probably a better tool to use for this purpose.
Yep. Yep. All right, lightning round. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. We have Lily OK. .tiff. I guess that's interesting. And a couple other people too. Sophie Go HRDP is here. BP Productions 03. They all want to see if you have advice for female cinematographers.
Oh, we lost our friend.
Well, he'll come back.
I mean, being a female cinematographer is its own journey. It is complicated, but any the film industry is hard no matter what gender you are. And I think you just need to stay focused on what your dreams are. I've been at this for 30 years, and this is my dream. And I have been in the face of no almost my entire life. And to then get to go make Wicked has been incredibly it has just been a complete dream come true. I have always wanted this, right? Like, I've always wanted to work on these big movies that felt like women didn't often get the opportunity to shoot. And I think that I don't know what I'm trying to say. But I feel very grateful. And in these last few months, as the movie started to escalate and started to build sort of the success that it's built, the best part of this whole thing has been meeting the women that I have met, and them coming up to me and telling me their stories and their journeys, and just seeing how many amazing female storytellers there are in the world. And I can't wait to hear their stories.
I love that. I love that. What's next for you? Any other musicals you're gearing up for? That's from Rolana Torres on Instagram.
I'm working on something, but I'm not allowed to say what it is. Unfortunately, it is not a musical, though. I can say that much.
Oh, you must be. Is that an exciting thing for you? Something different?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't done musicals in a long time, and then and then suddenly the last 6 years I've been doing only musicals. So yeah, no, totally fun, excited.
Oh, that's awesome. And Connor's back, but we've got one last question for you, and I think this is probably the most important and maybe even the most controversial, because both Ariana and Cynthia have admitted to stealing something from set.
Oh.
I want to know, have you stolen something from the Wicked set?
I didn't steal something from the Wicked set, but I asked for two things and I got them, which are two light fixtures from the Shiz sets. I got 2 light fixtures from the shiz sets. So that was what I wanted, and that's what I got.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show, Alice. You're so fun to talk to. You really are an inspiration for all cinematographers. But of course, we've got so many questions about being a woman in cinematography. So you're certainly inspiring there too. And the film is just incredible. All your stuff is awesome. And I can't wait to see, well, you're going to be coming back for part 2, I hope.
I hope so too. That's 1 year from now. I'll
Yes.
talk to you in 1 year.
We'll save the date. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.